American President Richard Nixon suspended military action in North Vietnam on January 15, 1973, giving peace talks between his national security advisor Dr. Henry Kissinger and North Vietnamese leader Duc Tho a chance to succeed. It was the main event of 1973. When Nixon inherited the war from President Lyndon Johnson with his election to the presidency in 1969, he embarked on a campaign to end US involvement that involved the gradual withdrawal of troops, punctuated by intense bombing attacks on North Vietnam. With the anti-war movement gaining strength in America, there was plenty of pressure on government to end the involvement. In late 1972, secret discussions were conducted by Dr. Henry Kissinger and Duc Tho, and they were nearing agreement on a negotiated end to the fighting in Vietnam. After reviewing the agreement, however, South Vietnamese President Nguyen Van Thieu demanded major alterations to the document. In response, the North Vietnamese published the details of the agreement and stalled the negotiations. Nixon then increased military attacks in order to try to force North Vietnam back to the negotiating table. Despite repeated attempts, though, negotiations were unproductive, and President Nixon announced that they would return to the discussion table.
On the negotiating front, we have informed the North Vietnamese, after consultation with the government of Vietnam, that we will return to the negotiating table in Paris on April 13th, Thursday. We have been informed by the North Vietnamese, the Viet Cong, that they too will return on that date. We have returned to the negotiating table, or will return to it, on the assumption that the North Vietnamese are prepared to negotiate in a constructive and serious way.
The Americans' heavy bombing campaign caused protests both domestically and internationally, and despite significant aircraft losses over North Vietnam, President Nixon continued the operation until the talks with government leaders in Paris. These operations were also designed to prevent North Vietnam from abandoning negotiations and seeking total victory. On January the 15th, White House Press Secretary Ronald Ziegler announced that President Nixon had suspended offensive actions against North Vietnam while peace talks were taking place.
Because of the progress made in the negotiations between Dr. Kissinger and Special Advisor Duc Tho, President Nixon has directed that the bombing, shelling, and any further mining of North Vietnam be suspended. This order went into effect at 10 a.m. today, January the 15th, Washington time.
On January the 27th, 1973, all four parties involved in the Vietnam conflict, the United States, South Vietnam, North Vietnam, and the PRG revolutionary government formally signed the Treaty of Paris, ending direct American participation in the Vietnam conflict. The final terms called for a ceasefire between North and South Vietnam, the withdrawal of American forces from South Vietnam, the end of all foreign military operations in Cambodia and Laos, and the release of all American prisoners of war within 60 days. With the hostilities at an end, America began to withdraw its troops from the jungles of Southeast Asia. On March the 29th, 1973, the last US troops left Vietnam. The Paris Peace Treaty, however, did little to end the bloodshed for the Vietnamese, and fighting between South Vietnamese and the Communists continued until 1975, despite the peace agreement. Of all the wars in which America has been involved, none has touched a chord as deeply as the conflict in Vietnam.